Veronica Hart, our own Veronica Hart, has written a brilliant introduction, which she will now present. It's all yours.
Hi. Trying to adjust. Okay, this is good.
Yeah, that's good. You don't
Okay.
have to lean into it, you just have to make it pointed the right way. Yeah.
Feeling paralyzed by existential anxiety is an appropriate reaction to the decisions powerful institutions have made for humankind over the past several hundred years. The legacy of colonialism is a magnificent failure that excels only in finding a way to further descend into horrors beyond comprehension. And as artists, we are all now struggling to piece together meaningful work in a society that is marked by past, present, and inevitable brutalities. We wield a neutral force that can either be complicit or used wisely to reckon with the past and build connections in the present through recognition of our shared reality and each other. Consequence, universality, attachment, recognition, these are some of the themes the artist Austin Martin White invokes for viewers of his paintings, and the conversations these works invite are among the most crucial discourses we can have today. At each stage in his paintings, White subverts expectations by using non-traditional mediums like spray paint, nylon mesh, and rubber, and through their application as layers, conveys to the viewer that even modern materials are loaded with a complex history. He often uses a repurposed vinyl machine as a tool to embed paint on fabric, which produces a previously collaged digital image that falls into entropy as paint runs out. This mechanical technique directly challenges the illusion of control through brushwork and holds a mirror to painters of the past, especially those in the mainstream who uncritically served the capitalist agenda. The subversion or removal of tradition also allows for a new form of creation to take place, one that shows figures overlapping in outline in neon pixels that compose most of his night worlds of inverted colors and dancing patterns. In his 2022 solo show, Last Dance, at Capitan Petzel Gallery in Berlin, White specifically honed in on the world of ravers, depicting figures celebrating life through dance. However, at times, these figures look like they are in a state of frenzied manic pain. Additionally, there are moments of extreme violence as the figures both perpetuate the existence of and are consciously trapped in a brutal state. The dual interpretations of these images allows for a breadth of emotion to be captured within paint, and despite the abstracted spaces and heavily saturated colors in Never to Belong book cover, for instance, the layering of the image and its narrative structure draws the viewer irresistibly inside the painting. They are a part of the image as well as a specter of it. These works do not exist as in an alternate dimension despite their fantastic visual invention. They depict our reality and recognize the humanity of the viewer. White is originally from Detroit but lives and works in Philadelphia. He got his BFA from the Cooper Union and his MFA from the Milton Avery Graduate School of Arts at Bard College. He has had solo exhibitions in New York, Rome, and Berlin, and is represented by Petzel Gallery. Please join your hands to welcome Austin Martin White.
Hey everybody, I apologize for my tardiness and maybe my unpreparedness. I've never done this before. This is like, all this stuff is very new to me. So any bumps or anything like that, or any, please forgive me. I'm not used to this yet.
We're super nice, don't worry.
Okay. So I created this presentation with like 2 studio shots. So one of which is this, which is just showing me like in the studio, and it kind of like demystifies the process, because I do spend a lot of time talking about that. So I'll just zoom in here. So this here is a piece of burlap, and then this is the vinyl, and then the vinyl is adhered to a screen which is on this frame, and then I'm applying rubber, pigmented rubber from behind, pushing it through the screen and through the, I guess I like to call it a mask, but it can be more easily understood as a stencil. And I'll show you this, and this is another image earlier on, before I developed that process, when I first started kind of realizing the potential of using the screen mesh as a substrate for my paintings. So initially I would paint on the substrate and just on the front, creating blockages in the screen, which then I would later block out, or like fill all the voids not filled by the paint with the pigmented rubber. So I'm going to start with some of my pre-graduate school work, like both like while I was in grad school and before. So I was right before, when I went to Cooper Union. Cooper was kind of an interesting place, because no one had to sort of commit to a major, so everyone there kind of moved through different mediums very nebulously, and certain people would focus on certain things. I think eventually I dabbled in video and sculpture, and I think I just ended up where it kind of started, which was painting. But one thing I would like to talk about, though, is when I was at Cooper, in that milieu or whatever, I felt that, not necessarily amongst some professors, but mainly amongst the students, that there was, and this was in the mid-2000s, there was like a push towards attitude, and a push towards and this was also like the time of, at least in New York, it was like a very popular time for, I guess what's called like Andy Warhol's children. I guess they were Dan Colin, Dash Snow, and Ryan McKinley. And they were all white, and they're all male, and they're all tall, and they're all relatively handsome. And I don't think I feel like that, and I feel like that kind of like set this tone over Cooper, which kind of discouraged me and maybe other artists of color from like maybe delving into or wanting to work with content kind of around race and stuff like that. And so for that time at Cooper, I feel like I really suppressed a lot of like my want and desire to like work with like understanding maybe my perspective of looking at art. But during that time, I kind of just focused on things that I liked, and things like formal aspects and formal things, and I became very like attracted to like very like the minimalist, very hard formal artists, such as like the minimalists or hard edge painters, or people dealing with things that completely didn't have anything to do with human beings outside of like pure making. So when I started grad school, I made the decision to kind of delve into my what I perceived as like my identity or my subject position or perspective on art and on art history. So I started looking, that's where my kind of interest in colonialism kind of started. And this was one of the first pieces I did, like right before grad school, literally maybe a month or two before, which I exhibited in Germany in Cologne at a gallery called Jan Kaps with, it was a small group show. And this was a piece I called Power to the People. It was just, I was looking at a lot of, I was very interested in the Black Panthers printmaking style and a lot of, and this sounds ridiculous, but and a lot of the aestheticization of the Nation of Islam throughout its time. I think I was drawn kind of to that because where I grew up in Detroit, there was like a very strong mysticism around the Nation of Islam because there was I think one of the first, well, it was founded there in Detroit, and one of the first like temples was like around the block from my father's house, and so I just became interested in that aesthetic. Not that it necessarily went anywhere, but I wanted to like work with it. So this is another image dealing with that, and this is a portrait of Elijah Muhammad, which is like kind of abstract. I did not exhibit this anywhere. This was just kind of me kind of letting myself like into this kind of like new world of like content.
Austin, sorry, can you turn the mic toward you?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just as you try, if you turn it toward you, it'll be enough. That's good.
Yeah. Can you get? Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so this is like these again skin rip-off. But yeah, like I said, I was just exploring these like sort of symbols that were new to me, or maybe not so new, but things that, I don't know, were interesting to me. And I think they like kind of influence my my process currently, like with the collaging of historical artifacts or things that can be perceived as historical references.
What's the date on this?
2015, 2014. And this was, of course, that was the outcome of that year. Okay, so that is my prelude. So now I'll get into the work that I did during graduate school. To explain. Okay, so during graduate school, I read a book called Savage Paradise, which was an analyzation of a painter, a Dutch painter, who was hired by a Dutch viceroy to go to what is now, I believe, Suriname, but was at the time Dutch Brazil, to do what were known as like, what are now known as like the first ethnographic portraits of the newly acquired subjects of this viceroy. And this happened during the 15th century. And, with all the naturalism that was abound at the time, I don't think they really realized what they were doing, but they were establishing what we can perceive now as like stereotypes for people. And they were doing that using kind of Renaissance symbolism. So there would be associations between certain vegetables or fruits or animals and people. And I found that and I was very like affected by that because I am a person of like, I'm a biracial person. So I always wanted to just understand these like, maybe, I don't know, these labels are like fabricated identities, like fabricated identity associations like, placed on me. So I decided that would be a good like, and just in general on people and where they come from. And I wanted to like kind of destroy that and use that as like fuel to make work. So this is taken from one of the paintings that were described in that book. This is a depiction of a war dance. I've like made the figures so that they're just male and they're just like nude figures and taken their kind of identity out of the equation.
How big is that?
This is roughly 10 feet by 7 feet. This painting no longer exists because as maybe this will happen to you in your journey as an artist, but sometimes you lose faith in yourself and you throw all your work away, and this I threw in the garbage. But I think I consider it one of my better paintings, one of my best paintings. And I've come back to it a lot, trying to remake it, but I never really can. This was also a painting, this was not a painting taken from Albert Eco, but Augustin Brunez, who was a genre painter, but a colonial genre painter who painted in the Caribbean, and mainly painted free people of color in the Caribbean islands, in which he ended up falling in love with ones and ended up living in the Caribbean during the 16th century. And what was interesting about his paintings is that there is like, and what's interesting about the others too, and what looking at ethnographic imagery, is that there's a fetishization that kind of occurs, and I became kind of interested in that. And in a way, that's kind of how I sort of came to using rubber initially. And it was that its association, well, for me, it's like, I guess, a personal fetishization with the material, but using the material maybe not as like a sexual like fetish, but more of like just a fascination with the material of rubber. And then over time and subsequently using kind of the process that I kind of just ad hoc sort of came to, I began to recognize that through learning rubber's history that it's very much tied to colonialism, and kind of reinforces materially the subject that I am interested in. So this image, this painting I did twice. I sometimes do paintings more than one time, but I call these paintings Uber paintings because I began to want to connect sort of older histories to our current, current power dynamics. So this was this image or comes from a number of images that I was looking at when I began researching the rubber trade in the Free Congo state. And yeah, it just kind of stood out to me. And I kind of wanted to fuck with it by like creating kind of a reversal of the power structure. So, and this was also a piece done during that time of, like I was saying before, about the symbolic relationship between certain racial groups or identities, colonial identities. So I decided to play with the screen or like a screen window and use it as like as a structure for a like sculpture painting hybrid. Not that I do this a lot, but when just based on like how I work, I in the studio, I guess just became very attracted to these paintings, like sort of freestanding in space. I don't necessarily do that so much now, but I think when you're in school, experimentation is great, and you should definitely encourage it. There's lots of great ideas that can happen, maybe, but sometimes maybe just for the sake of experimentation. So this is.
Austin, I have a question. Well, you said the reversal of the power structure and the way you were making paintings. How did you mean that, or how does that work exactly?
In the original, it's the figures are the figure that's being carried is like a Belgian woman across a river. So in the fit no. So yeah, these I wanted to kind of change the figure to be a dark skin person.
I see.
Okay, so that is my graduate school work. Okay. So, so the next sort of body of work I kind of began to work on was when I was offered a two-person show at the Derek Heller Gallery in New York with Catherine St. Hilaire, who is a Haitian artist who does work with rubber, but works with like rubber, non-liquefied rubber, like rubber tires, as like a material to paint on top of. But also, we both also have like kind of interest in like sort of post-colonial fallout. So we kind of came, and this was a show that we did that was conceived like during COVID, and the title kind of came from, during COVID I listened to a audiobook about Captain Cook, and found it kind of fascinating. And well, it was I read this book about Captain Cook, and then at the time there was a lot of SpaceX launches, and a lot of discussion about SpaceX and Elon Musk and people colonizing Mars. And I began, so we had a conversation about, and at the same time there was, the George Floyd protests. And it made me think about the Gil Scott Heron song, Whitey on the Moon, and how that compared to that whole dynamic was very just relevant, or that saying was so relevant at that moment. So, I mean, so we came up with the title Celestial Transits because, in a way, a part of the funding that Captain Cook got to do his voyage, in which he came across Australia and a lot of the islands in the Pacific, he was tasked, he got the funding to track the transit of Venus. And so that kind of also tied into this exploration and colonialization and even Captain Cook's demise in Hawaii and the subsequent colonization of Hawaii and Australia and a lot of the places that we visited. Just kind of tied into this this connection between exploration or the ideals of the Enlightenment being kind of faulty, being that it doesn't exploration doesn't or this progress doesn't really lead to progress. It kind of leads to more human misery. So yeah, so we kind of in that moment we made this show, and I made the next couple of works based on that, based on etchings that I found, of Captain Cook's journey. So a lot of the images are kind of direct references to these etchings and to Captain Cook.
These were etchings that were made at the time by...
Yeah, maybe 50 or some odd, don't quote me on that, 50 or some odd years afterwards.
Right.
I mean, they don't have the moon in them and stuff like that. I mean, I've manipulated them and changed them, but the base references from these etchings. And that too is also kind of become a part of my process is using these etching archives and just archives in general to compile large folders of files or images that I use to create my own imagery. Etchings are a particular favorite of mine. I think because I like to draw, and I also, like I mentioned before, have these sort of formal instincts, I guess, towards line and high detail.
Is that on, what's the surface that's on?
So this is the initial image that I showed of the burlap with the sort of screen apparatus in front of it. That painting that I was working on, that image, that initial image was actually a reject painting for the show. So all these paintings are the rubber, the vinyl mesh that's stretched over burlap. Sometimes the burlap is painted, but most often the burlap is dyed. So this is Captain Cook, lost in space. Okay, so this image is actually a callback to when I was talking about the Savage Paradise book. This is a riff off of one of Albert Eckau's paintings, ethnographic images. I mean, I've change some things around, like put a ship in there, put a moon in there, put a different plant, and play around with some of the parts of the image, but the central figures are directly from Albert Akau's work, depicting a African woman and child. So this is good because this is what led me to the show that was mentioned earlier, that was at Petzl, the two shows that I did last year. So with my kind of interest in the ethnographic image and colonial imagery in general, and kind of building these archives, I came across this genre of painting that occurred in Spanish colonies during the 16th and 17th century. Primarily in Mexico, but it did happen also in Bolivia and in Peru to a lesser extent, but mainly in Mexico. This genre, and in Spain, but it was projected onto the New World colonies, Spanish colonies, and the genre is called Costa paintings. And Costa paintings are a genre of painting that depicted different racial coupling and their offspring. And being, like I said before, being a person who is biracial, like this really kind of struck a nerve for me, because it also like it created a hierarchy, a social hierarchy with these racial mixtures in their place in colonial society, and kind of left an imprint on, I feel like, left an imprint on the legacy of, racial identification, classification.
Did you find yourself critiquing the categories that they created in the process of creating work that was in dialogue with those Costa paintings? For example, how they go to the very limit of even sort of identifying types of mixtures down to the 8th, the 16th, the 32nd, and giving those names like Zambo or Mulatto or Criollo, right? And so how did you kind of have a conversation with your materials in relationship to those hierarchies?
How did I have a conversation? Well, initially I wanted to destroy it and like dismantle that because it's denoting people as like different variations of animals is pretty despicable stuff.
Agreed.
So that was my kind of approach, and I think that's, I mean, what can we do with this stuff as like artists besides just like personally respond to it, I wanted to destroy it. I wanted to play with it. I wanted to, dismantle it, and using the things at my disposal, using color form, collage, ripping, tearing, these things.
Is that like some kind of alchemical transformation of this gross material into something beautiful or something you can actually use in some way?
In what sense do you mean?
Well, in the way, Tony, was that you?
Yeah.
To her question, you take this material that's so tainted, and then you put it through your own artistic process, and it becomes something else altogether. Something that you actually want to look at, and it's, you know, it's both a reflection on the taintedness and a conversion of that into some other kind of material. Does that
Yeah.
make any sense? I mean,
No, I understand. Yeah, I think maybe just expression is probably the thing that I wanted to transform into. As selfish as that sounds, yeah. I don't have any like grand political schemes to like change anything in the dynamics of anything. I mean, just this being in some wealthy person's house as like a gesture, antagonistic gesture, enough tricking someone into believing that this is like a beautiful thing that they should, that they probably, they probably benefited in some way from like this kind of oppression, and having like a middle finger in their living room is probably satisfaction enough for me. And I know that's pretty. I know that's pretty like I don't know. It's a pretty weak thing to say or do, or complicit or something. But I think that this is enough. This is enough. Enough of. This is all I can do. This is all I can do. So that's So moving on. Sorry for stumbling and fumbling. So here's some more installation shots of the show. Okay, so I will move on to the next show I did, which was the next significant show. Okay. This next body of work is the work that I did for the show in Germany at Kapitalpasel. It was probably my first, it was my first solo show, and it was a very large building in Berlin. It was a former Soviet building, or it was a former, Soviet, it was in the east, so it was like a Soviet-controlled building, so the architecture is very socialist. Not that that means anything, but it was 3 floors, so it was a lot of work for my first solo show, but I did it. So this show kind of came out of a lot of things. It came out of my interest in, my further interest in making sort of analogies from the past, and making analogies with instances of the future. So in this show, I titled Last Dance, which kind of came out of, because at the time the show was offered to me, I was looking at a lot of etchings from the United States of the expansion into the West, and became interested in this phenomenon of the depiction of war dances and how they were inaccurate, and they were inaccurate because the artist, or the tribes that let the artists in to depict their dances were subverting the artist's depictions by depicting the wrong dances or making fake dances for them to depict because they didn't want the colonizer they didn't want the artist, the Western artist, to kind of gain their secrets, whether it's their spiritual secrets to their war dances. So I became interested in that, and I became interested in the idea of war dancing and the idea of preparing yourself for death, like through an act of joy, or maybe not joy, or maybe joy to a certain extent, but like kind of revelry or like hyping yourself up to prepare yourself for war or annihilation. And it made me think of that. I came to that thought from looking at the imagery, of course, but also because like during COVID, I spent a lot of time going to, probably this isn't good, and probably shouldn't say this, well, whatever, it doesn't matter, but I spent a lot of time going to like secret raves that were being held in the midst of the shutdown in New York and in Philadelphia and in Detroit. And I became interested in that space as this like space of defiance with everything that was going on. So I made a body of work that was included in the show, which was in the basement, which was kind of also very kind of new step for me to moving away from the rubber. Well, the rubber is included, but it's not the main feature of these paintings. But using the machine that I used to produce the stencils or masks for the rubber, using that machine to produce drawings for like large-scale watercolor paintings. So that was kind of like the premise of that show, and then everything around that kind of was very like doomy or apocalyptic, and the imagery for those, like for example, this image that's on the screen a lot of images came from the Haitian Revolution, etchings of the Haitian Revolution, and etchings of different like atrocities during revolutionary moments throughout history.
Also, before you move on with the slide, could you zoom in on that just to see the surface of it close up? Is that possible? Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. So this again is another image taken from an etching from depicting the Haitian Revolution.
May I ask why colonial Latin America specifically? It seems.
An attraction for me, or like why I gravitate towards that.
Yeah, only because I was a Latin American studies major, so like I'm really like into the fact that it's coming up a lot in your work, but it's like as a colonial space for you to be talking about, why that particular colonial space as opposed to any other kind of global space where colonialism was deeply impacted, if that makes any sense. Like why Latin America? Why the Caribbean, you know?
Because I guess because there's just the most amount, in terms of an archive, there's the most amount of an archive to like observe. And I think, in other instances there isn't the same archive to like look at and kind of, to observe or, to delve into, or even writing, there's a lot more content there to consume and learn about, and to identify with for me. Not that, I'm not gonna claim that I'm Caribbean at all, but it's just interesting history for me because it's just so blatant.
Thank you, I appreciate
No.
that. Yeah, seriously, awesome.
So this is, so I did 4 large paintings that were loosely based on, that was in the show, that were loosely and going with the theme of a party or of revelry before an apocalypse or something, which were taken from compositions from the artist Bob Thompson, who was also an artist that looked at things from the past and made new things from them. He looked at a lot of, but he looked at a lot of like European classics and used classical painting and used that as like as a formal or compositional like way to make paintings about new or about new subjects.
Can you do the close-up thing one more time? They just have such a specific kind of physical presence. It's good to see that. Yeah.
This one is kind of a hybridization between Thompson and then also some of the images from some images from the Haitian Revolution or components. As this one is one of the figures actually comes from that war dance, from that painting that I threw away. I did during grad school. So a couple figures from there, and then a number of figures from Bob Thompson paintings, and a number of figures from French Revolution. There is a character too that I've introduced as kind of the avatar for reading my work, which is this little guy. I don't know why I can't zoom in. Guy here. Now a lot of people say that he's a SpongeBob, which I don't mind. But he's taken from a clip art of an iPhone, man, and I just. I don't know why I picked him, but I think I kind of picked him because he, for me, acts like Clippy from Microsoft, old Microsoft Word, where they kind of tells you what to do, or he kind of informs you about the image in a way. So I kind of use him in that way to like act as like a kind of entrance into maybe how to read a painting. And this is my first use of him, but I've subsequently used him a lot recently and plan on using him a lot in the future. I think that's it for these paintings. So now I'll go into the drawings. Now, that's not the right one. Sorry. So all of the paintings were on the first floor, and then the basement, because the basement of this gallery was also subsequently acted as a nightclub. in the early 90s, so I thought it was fitting to put the rave theme work in a place that used to actually house a rave. And then on the top floor, I showed these drawings, which were all taken from different imagery around what's known as Fordlandia, which was Henry Ford's failed rubber plantation in the Amazon, which I still plan on doing more work on. But this was like kind of a prerequisite work for that. But I kind of made a set of drawings to initially deal with that, and that was on the top floor. So these are using the same machine I used to create the masks or stencils for the rubber work, but instead of taking the blade out and kind of rigged it up so that it uses different markers, pens, and pencils. This one doesn't necessarily have to do with Fordlandia. This is more of more images from the Free Congo State and the rubber run on that country. So this is a good example of, this is one of the watercolors that I was talking about before. I mean, but this has to do more with this was on the top floor as well, and this has kind of went along more with the theme of, because this is a painting of a sculpture that's in Fordlandia, which is a kind of abandoned site in the middle of the Amazon. Sculpture of a rubber harvester, which just really strange to me. So it made it very.
Can you zoom on that?
On this?
Yeah.
So this also this has a screen kind of wrapped around the paper. And on the screen, there is this rubber bit here. But everything else is underneath, and it's on paper.
The screen is no longer on the drawing, it's only there during the process? Is that-
No, it's on this.
It's on the drawing.
It's wrapped around the
Okay.
drawing. And in the next couple of works, you'll see that I've done the same thing. This painting is called Eviction, and it is building a factory building in Fordlandia that I decided to paint because it kind of reminded me of a lot of, growing up in Detroit, it reminded me of a lot of the abandoned auto factories that were in Detroit, and it was surreal to me to see these images like in this sort of lush tropical setting in the Amazon. And at the time I was making this painting, I was getting evicted from my studio in Philadelphia, and while trying to prepare for the show that this work was in. So I don't know, it's a pretty meaningful painting to me for sentimental reasons. This is the initial painting of, like, when I was speaking earlier about the rave and war dance imagery. So there's a lot of figures in here. Some of them are from war dances. Some of them are from different sort of revelry throughout history, and then in the background is a burning building. If you guys are familiar with the famous Berlin club Berghain, it's a depiction of Berghain on fire and everybody dancing outside. All the people who Berghain is also like a very exclusive place. People wait in line for days just to get rejected at the door, which has happened to me a number of times. So I don't know. I mean, which I don't know. Depend on who you are. Some people like that aspect, some people don't. But I just thought it'd be funny if all the people in the line had a party outside while I don't know, some accident happened inside the club itself. So the next couple of images are the war dance. Some of the figures come from war dances. Some of the figures come from images from rape culture. Some of the images are just made up. Another thing that kind of ran through the show and kind of runs through my work too is the theme of ghosts. I think I kind of attribute this to my interest in ontology and how that idea kind of plays its part in how I like reflect and like regurgitate the references in which I like use and work with.
Could you zoom on that last one, please? Yeah.
So yeah, these are paper with screen, and then these bits are rubber, more bold parts, and then they're kind of held on by a lot of paper clips. Okay, so that's the end of those. All right. Okay, so this painting wasn't included in the. So I'm moving on now to the show that the two shows that I just did last year, and the work that I did for that. So these two shows I wanted to focus on the theme of the Costa paintings, and as like sort of a guiding subject for me to like kind of explore. One show was at a very reputable big gallery, Petzl, and the other was at the place that I showed before earlier, Derek Eller Gallery. One show was in the Upper East Side of New York. It was a pretty wealthy place, probably with a lot of people with questionable fortunes, and the other one was downtown in the Lower East Side, block away from the tenement museum, and a couple blocks from Chinatown. So I kind of wanted to play, I mean, given the theme of hierarchy, that is genre of Costa painting. I kind of wanted to play with that, with the fact that I was having these two simultaneous shows. So the show Downtown kind of mainly focused on Costa paintings that I had. Well, the whole show kind of came out of my trip at the beginning of the year. I went to Mexico and went and saw surviving Costa paintings that were there, and I paid close attention to how the institutions in Mexico displayed these Costa paintings, and they displayed them with, there was a, like, it was interesting because they kind of were trying to turn the narrative or change the narrative or change the narrative from being this kind of sort of dark, maybe, very kind of not PC kind of narrative, to changing it to being this example of the strength of Mexico's diversity. And what they kind of did, which was interesting, so Costa paintings like this painting that's on the screen right now, typically depicted in a grid, at the least a grid of 8 and at the most a grid of 16. But they're usually in a grid of top to bottom grid. And in Mexico, I found that the curators at these institutions, they tried to play with distort that grid by hanging them at zigzags or not hanging them in a grid, or just hanging them in a line, so that the hierarchy was no longer can be pointed to. And I thought that was really interesting. And I found that there was also vertical Costas, like Costas that were depictions of where everyone was on the same level, and there was no people on top, people on bottom. And I thought that was very interesting formally, and I used that as a distinguishing factor between these two shows. So the show Downtown at Derek Eller, I decided to focus on these Costas that I encountered in Mexico that were linear in nature.
Can you zoom in to this piece?
Yeah.
Austin, is Costa Spanish for an English cast?
Yeah.
C-A-S-T-E, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Is that good?
It's also a good way, Stephen, of tracking sort of ancestry,
Right.
And so there's a term called torno atrás, which is necessary for folks who are trying to figure out when there would be a darker skinned baby that would be born into the family.
Right.
So yeah, it's
Right,
a caste
right.
system essentially that's organized by indigenous and African ancestry and
Right.
combinations of those.
And there, also, this is a side note, but there was also like, just because that actually just really reminded me of something that was like a bigger push that I couldn't really articulate in the show, in the press release, but it was, my dad had done a 23andMe the year right before, and he found out that his father was his father, and that his neighbor was his neighbor that he grew up with was his father. And we had this whole other family history. I didn't know how to slip that into the Costas, but I wanted to write about it more, but it's a little bit, and my father didn't want me to kind of put that in any kind of press, for obvious reasons. But I thought, that was also something that kind of drove this in this maybe subconscious way.
These are all about, what, 8 feet or something?
Yeah, no, this is, yeah, no, yeah, I mean, this one is probably about 8 feet by just over 5 feet. So I know I'm like droning out, we're getting towards the end, so I'm just gonna kind of fly through these. So this is a mirror that kind of just is a distortion of this painting, of the kind of sort of structure of this painting, formal structure of this painting, with the figures taken out. The mirror, my thoughts were that the people observing the show would be implicated in this, in that sort of Costa structure.
And the mirror, is there like a stencil print?
Yeah, the vinyl that I
Yeah.
use for a stencil, I used as a sort of adhered it to the mirror. So this is the mirror without the painting in the background. This is with the painting in the background. All of these paintings also were painted on what were stretched over and used glow-in-the-dark paint, and the substrate, the fabric was also glow-in-the-dark. The idea, I know it's very much overdone. Jacqueline Humphreys, which is I'm a huge fan of her work, did a lot of very, very, very good and unchallengeable glow-in-the-dark paintings. So I kind of wanted, it wasn't necessarily a homage to her, but I kind of wanted to use that material to kind of maybe in a campy way suggest like a haunting. So the show, it wasn't that the show, during the opening that was shown, all the paintings were shown in black light, but when the show was just open during the week, you could only ask, if you knew to ask, request to see the work in the black light. Otherwise, it would just be in the way that you're seeing it now. So it's the iPhone guy who makes, even another appearance here too. He's here. And he's here. This was a painting that was put into the show. It wasn't made during the same time as the work that I just showed. It was actually made back when I was working with the images of the Haitian Revolution. It comes from an etching of Charlemagne, the founder of France, Christianizing the rural French and making them pull down their icons to their pagan gods, but felt that had, in terms of the theme of the show of leveling, felt like it kind of, and also the palette as well, kind of fit. So I decided reluctantly last minute to include it in the show, but I think it really helped. It's a pretty good painting, but it's also a painting. This is back before I used the vinyl color, so this was when I used the initial process of painting on the front of the screen and blocking the holes of the screen, and then as a final step, pushing the pigmented rubber through at the end. So the next little grouping of works is what I call the book covers, and these paintings kind of come out of, and this is like I guess like a body of work that I'm just gonna be continually making, but they're taken from the images and the titles are taken from like trashy pulp novels, made in the like 30s through the 60s and 70s in the United States. Typically, the ones in this show being dealing with the Costa paintings, I wanted to. All of these titles came from books that were about the like tragic mulatto myth, but they are rearranged. They're not. This isn't exactly what they look like. I did what I do with most stuff, just kind of change things around.
Is that one of the paper ones?
This is a rubber one.
And how big are these ones?
42 inches by 28 inches. Okay, so that is that show.
Also, we're gonna have to end in about 5 minutes, okay?
All right, perfect. All right, so so this is the Uptown show that I mentioned before. So well-to-do neighborhood in New York, in a brownstone, former residence. And this kind of focused, this show, whereas the show downtown focused on leveling, this kind of show was kind of focused more on the grid and more on the hierarchical nature of the grid and structure as it relates to power. So, for example, this is a grid, an abstracted gridded Costa, whereas like this is just one cell.
Can you zoom on that one, the right-hand one? Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
And there's our iPhone guy.
Yeah.
Can you go back, can you zoom in just to the top part?
Here?
Just like the face and the body with that guy. Just wanted to take a picture.
The black person?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Are you just using your hands to push the rubber through, or is there another tool involved?
No, I have like a bunch of different kind of like palette knives and mudding, not like knives for like doing drywall, like they come in different widths, and depending on the width and the spread of how it spreads on that knife, like can determine like how thin I want it, how thick I want it. Yeah, if I want to like have like really gushy like parts where it kind of oozes out, or if I want to like get a lot of detail, like where it kind of mirrors the extrusion mirrors the screen, the pattern of the texture of the screen.
And are you mixing pigment into the liquid rubber?
Yeah. So I take I get Kremer pigments. If you guys paint, you should know about Kremer pigments. Really good stuff. If you make your own paint, they're amazing. You get the powder pigment. Kind of like how you make an acrylic or how you make oil. You kind of yeah, do the same thing with the rubber.
And the rubber, yeah, that's the step that actually goes through and lands on the vinyl? Is that what I
Well, the
read?
vinyl, like, is like, think about it like a stencil, like a spray paint stencil, but the stencil stays on, and then instead of it being spray paint, it's like rubber. But then you're seeing the reverse instead of seeing like just the surface. If that makes sense.
What do you were saying something about blocking out parts? Or when that's when you put the rubber through? How do you block it out?
You guys can do the tech explanation later on, okay? We're
I-
running out
all
of
your
time. Let him
technical
finish
questions,
it,
I
yeah.
get them all the time.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of a very idiosyncratic process.
I agree, it's very interesting, but let's do it later, okay? Remember that.
Sorry. So this is an install shot. So then this is my own kind of Costa that I kind of made in a grid.
Can you zoom on that?
Yeah. And then I did a couple more of the, like, those ballpoint drawings of different gridded Costas as well as individual cells.
A bit of a zoom there, even more. Can you go closer?
Closer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Distorts.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that texture.
Sorry. And this drawing comes from, it can be considered a Costa, but it's not technically a Costa. I mean, it kind of has a lot of the same formal characteristics of it, but this is from an image, an etching of an image of the British social structure. So they depicted it in the queen and the king. They depicted it in the form of a beehive with different cells. Yeah.
Is that like an 18th century image?
Yeah, well, 17th
17th.
century. Yeah. All right, that's it.
All right. Myron, we'll return to your question in the break during the crits.
Okay.
One last question before we move on. No?
No.
Well,
Okay.
I have one if no one else does.
Okay, go ahead, Fox.
I see a lot of Sigmar polka in your work,
Yeah.
and you spent a lot of time in Germany, and like one of the things in particular that I see is a kind of relationship to, I guess, technology as it relates to stereotypes and popular culture, like the sort of relationship, like as, you know, Polka thought of himself as like a German pop artist, right? So he's sort of using images that would have like circulated in the time out of the newspaper and things like that and sort of repurposing them in this alchemical way. So kind of maybe taking them out of time and putting them, sort of taking them out of the context in which they were used and then repurposing them in a way that sort of puts them back into the ether of the sort of like the magical realm. But also I think focusing on how the technologies have a sort of magical power over us, right? That they're very influential, that there's a sort of like almost like a spiritual kind of like possession that overtakes us, like in when we see things that, and I'm guessing that the Costa sort of codifies certain things that would have probably been more fluid otherwise, right? That
Yeah.
when something comes into an image, it takes a sort of solid form. But I guess I was just wondering if you could talk about like the kind of fluid, alchemical, mysterious, sort of acid green, dancer, rave kind of quality, and then in combination with this kind of more, well, strict, linear, careful, like it takes a lot of time, there's a lot of like slowness. I don't know if I don't know.
Like in
It's
terms
a
of-
vague question, but I'm trying to sort of.
Like the relationship between the color, the palette choice, and
Yeah, I
the
guess
content.
between the form and the subject matter, very, very loosely. Well, maybe we can let the.
I mean,
Question.
I can answer the question. I think I need to think about it though, because it is it's an answer that it's a question that requires a complicated answer that. But I think like the relationship to, I think you can't deny yourself responding to technology. And I think like when even my interest in painting, even before all of the content and everything, I think like my interest in painting at the beginning, when I was at Cooper, when I was in undergrad, I was obsessed with how technology is impacting the way that we're seeing things, and like that's why before I came to the screen, how I even came to the screen was because before I worked with the nylon mesh. I mean, this is probably a pretty interesting story. Before I worked with the nylon mesh, I made paintings I made very meticulous paintings that were like basically pixels, or they're trying to play with the idea of pixels and weaving and also like hard edge painting and optical painting, and like kind of trying to think about how screens, the prevalence of screens in our lives is affecting the way that we're thinking about visualizing things. So those paintings though took a long time because they were very meticulous, and also there was a million people doing paintings like that at the time. And I fortunately got to go to the Skowhegan residency, and there at the residency, all the studios have these big mosquito screens like around all, because they're like barns, and how I came to start using the screen was because I was doing these meticulous paintings. I was also breaking up with a partner and going through life stuff, and got drunk and like woke up and realized that I had broken the screen. I thought I was going to get kicked out of the residency, and so I went to the local hardware store and was looking for something to fix it, and I found out that in Maine, because there's a huge there's lots of bugs in the summer, that a lot of people have screened patios, and a lot of people drink there, and a lot of accidents happen with screens. So they had a company that made these little patch kits that you could repair the screen with, and in that patch kit came a little tube of rubber, and I went back to the residency and patched the thing. But then what happened was I used a little bit too much rubber when I was adhering the patch to the screen, and I noticed that when the rubber went through, it made these perfect dots, like these perfect grid. That is like kind of what I wanted to achieve with my like meticulous painting, but doing it so much faster. And so I experimented with that for the rest of the summer. Nothing really great came out of that summer of using it, but I kept coming back to it. It's like, there's something here, there's something here, there's something here, until when I was in grad school, and I was like, oh, maybe let's come back to that again. So to answer your question, I know that was a really long-winded way of answering it, but like this did all come out of like responding to technology, and then in vague ways, like, you know, intersections occur, you know, like, so I hope that answered.
It's so hard to understand exactly how technology is affecting us, but we are all sort of grasping at ways to, I guess, get a handle on that somehow, so.
Yeah.
So I love the screen story.
Yeah.
It's a good story.
Okay. Before you get up, guys, just